Mother's Day should have been a day of flowers and gratitude. Instead, it began with a door slammed in my face. I stood at the entrance of the restaurant, clutching a bouquet of pink carnations, the very flowers that once meant admiration and love. My daughter-in-law, Rebecca, blocked the doorway with arms folded across her chest. Her voice cut through the warm chatter spilling from inside. "No seat for you, not until you apologize." Her words hit harder than any shove. Behind her, I could see my son, Daniel, adjusting silverware at the table. He did not lift his head. He did not defend me. He simply stayed silent, a man-shaped shadow avoiding his own mother. The smell of roasted chicken and warm bread drifted out to me, but it no longer felt inviting. It mocked me as though the feast itself joined their verdict. I gripped the carnations tighter, the paper crinkling under my trembling hand. I whispered, almost to myself, "So, this is how family love dies. Not with shouting, but with silence." For a moment, I stood frozen on that threshold, the sounds of laughter echoing behind Rebecca's sharp stare. My heart begged Daniel to look at me, to stop this humiliation. But his silence was heavier than any insult. I turned slowly, carrying my flowers back to the parking lot. Each step felt like walking through quicksand. When I reached my car, I slid into the driver's seat and placed the carnations gently on the passenger side. My fingers lingered on the pedals, my hand still shaking. And in that silence, memories surfaced like ghosts. I had once sold my wedding ring to cover their medical bills. I had once withdrawn from my 401k, paying penalties to keep Daniel and Rebecca from losing their home during the crash of 2008. Sacrifices carved from decades of work, trust, and love. And now, they left me standing outside on Mother's Day, as though I were a stranger. I looked at the carnations resting beside me, still alive, still waiting for a vase they would never reach. That night, I whispered to myself, calm and certain, "They'll regret it when their cards are declined tomorrow." Because my son and his wife had said, "You're not invited to Mother's Day until you apologize." And that was the moment I decided to close every account tied to their names. By the time my phone lit up with 32 missed calls, it would be too late. I drove away from the restaurant with the bouquet of carnations still trembling on the passenger seat, their pink petals soft and bright against the gray interior of my car. My fingers clenched the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned pale, yet my hands would not stop shaking. Outside, the May sunlight filtered through the windshield, golden but indifferent, as if it had no idea my heart had just been fractured. The radio hummed softly, filling the car with cheerful jingles. A Hallmark commercial played, promising the perfect Mother's Day gift with sentimental cards and flowers delivered to every doorstep. Moments later, another ad followed. Brunch specials at local restaurants, offering champagne and laughter for families who wanted to celebrate the women who raised them. Each word from the speakers was like a needle pressing deeper into the wound. To the world, Mother's Day was about love, gratitude, and togetherness. But for me, it had become the day my son and his wife shut me out. As I stopped at a red light, I noticed a family crossing the street. A little girl, no older than 7, carried a paper-wrapped bouquet nearly her size. She giggled as she nearly tripped over the curb, and her father bent down to steady her while the mother reached out, laughing. The three of them leaned into each other, the child proudly holding up her flowers as though they were a treasure. My chest tightened. That should have been me with Daniel once, joyful, needed, part of something whole. Instead, I sat in my car, unseen, invisible, carrying flowers no one wanted. The light turned green, but for a moment I could not move. I saw, not the road ahead, but a memory. Daniel at 10 years old, seated at the kitchen table with his math homework spread out in front of him. Numbers had always been his struggle, but that night he had pushed through, scribbling furiously, erasing until the paper was smudged gray. When he finally solved the last problem correctly, he looked up at me with relief and pride. On the bottom of the page, in his uneven handwriting, he had written, "Thanks, Mom." I remember how my heart swelled at those two words. Gratitude, pure and simple, poured into a scrawl of pencil lead. When did that boy disappear? When did the child who once turned to me with trust become the man who now bowed his head in silence while his wife barred me from Mother's Day? The question spun in my mind, heavy and relentless. The carnations rustled softly as the car rolled forward. They remained on the passenger seat where I had placed them, untouched and unresolved. I could not bring myself to throw them away, nor could I carry them inside a home that had rejected me. They lingered in that in-between place, neither given nor discarded, just like my love for Daniel. Still alive, but suspended. A love refused, yet not extinguished. I pulled into my driveway and parked, but I did not turn off the engine right away. The hum of the car filled the silence, a poor substitute for the warmth that should have been mine that afternoon. Across the street, my neighbor's porch was decorated with balloons and streamers. Grandchildren ran up the steps carrying boxes of cake, their laughter piercing through the air. I caught sight of my neighbor, Mrs. Parker, standing proudly as her children and grandchildren surrounded her with hugs. She looked radiant, wrapped in arms and affection. I turned my gaze away quickly, ashamed of the envy rising in me. Inside my car, the carnations waited, their stems wrapped neatly in green paper. I reached out and touched them, feeling the coolness of the petals beneath my fingertips. They were supposed to sit in a vase at a family table. Instead, they sat here, symbols of love unaccepted, sacrifices dismissed, motherhood rejected. Still, I could not discard them. They were proof of who I was, a mother who had given everything, even when her children forgot the cost. The silence around me thickened, pressing against my chest. Yet beneath it, a whisper stirred, quiet but unyielding. If silence was what Daniel and Rebecca had chosen for me, then silence would be my reply. But not the silence of defeat. No, mine would be the silence that waits, sharp and deliberate, until the moment comes when truth speaks louder than any insult. I shut off the engine, picked up my purse, and left the carnations where they were. They would stay on that seat for now, unthrown, unresolved, a fragile reminder that even in rejection, love does not vanish. It lingers, waiting, like a secret unspoken. The phone rang just after sunset. I had been sitting in the living room with the carnations still on the passenger seat of my car, too heavy to bring inside. The house was quiet, except for the ticking of the wall clock, each second echoing the hollow of my chest. When I picked up the receiver, I heard Mrs. Parker's familiar voice. "Alice," she said warmly, "I just wanted to tell you something. You are the strongest mother I've ever known." Her words caught me off guard. My throat tightened as if she had peeled away a layer I tried to keep hidden. Strength. That was what she saw when she looked at me from across the street, watching me shovel snow in winter or plant flowers in spring, carrying myself with dignity even when life pressed hard. To her, I was a model of resilience, but my own son could not see it. Daniel looked at me not with pride, but with shame, as if my worth were measured only by how quickly I bent to his wife's demands. I thanked Mrs. Parker softly, telling her I appreciated her kindness. After we hung up, I sat in silence, letting her words linger. The strongest mother. To outsiders, yes. But within my own family, I had become invisible. My mind drifted back to 2008, a year that still carved scars across my memory. The crash had gutted the country, taking homes, jobs, and hopes with it. Daniel had been 30 then, with Rebecca by his side, their faces pale as they sat at my kitchen table. Bills piled high, foreclosure letters looming, their voices breaking as they begged me for help. "Mom," Daniel had whispered, unable to meet my eyes. "If we lose the house, we lose everything. Rebecca will never forgive me." I can still see his hands trembling, the desperation pouring from him like water through cracked glass. And without hesitation, I did what mothers do. I sacrificed. I withdrew from my 401k, the retirement fund I had built dollar by dollar over decades of teaching and long nights of grading. The banker warned me of penalties, of taxes, of what it would mean for my own future. But none of it mattered in that moment. I signed the papers anyway, my heart overriding my reason. When Daniel clasped my hand afterward, tears in his eyes, I thought I had done the right thing. His voice cracked with gratitude. "Thank you, Mom. You saved us." Back then, I believed that sacrifice was love. I believed that giving up pieces of myself was proof that I cared. I sold my wedding ring to cover their medical bills. I pulled from my savings to bail them out of debts. Every time they fell, I laid down my own security as a cushion so they would not break. I thought love meant erasing my needs for theirs. But now, as I sat in the stillness of my empty house, I realized what that pattern had become. Those sacrifices were not gifts. They were chains. Every dollar I surrendered had bound me tighter to expectations that grew heavier with each passing year. Gratitude had faded. Entitlement had taken its place. What I once called love had turned into shackles that kept me from breathing freely. Mrs. Parker's compliment echoed again. The strongest mother. She saw my sacrifices as strength. Daniel and Rebecca saw them as obligation. They no longer recognized the difference between devotion and debt. I walked to the window and looked out at the darkened street. The glow of Mrs. Parker's porch light flickered softly. Inside her home, I imagined laughter, warmth, children gathered around a grandmother they cherished. And here I stood, cut off by my own family, labeled as a burden unless I apologized for sins I did not commit. Strength, it seemed, was easier for strangers to see than for those who shared my blood. I pressed my palm against the glass, the coolness seeping into my skin, and let the truth settle over me. I had spent decades believing silence was a form of patience, that waiting quietly would earn respect. But silence had become my prison. And yet, in that moment, I discovered a different kind of silence. The kind that was deliberate, sharp, unyielding. If silence was what Daniel and Rebecca had given me, then silence was what I would return. That night, the house was wrapped in a heavy silence. I had not turned on the television, nor did I bother with the radio. The carnations were still in the car, suspended in their place like a wound that refused to heal. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold when I heard the knock. It was soft at first, then urgent, rapid enough to send a chill down my spine. When I opened the door, my granddaughter Lily stood there. She was only 19, still with the softness of youth in her face, but her hands were trembling as she clutched a folder to her chest. Her eyes darted nervously over her shoulder before she slipped inside. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I had to come. I couldn't keep this to myself." I guided her to the table and watched as she set the folder down. Her hands shook so violently that the papers inside slid halfway out. I reached forward and steadied them, my own fingers trembling now. "What is this, sweetheart?" I asked gently. Her lips pressed together before she opened the folder and pushed the contents towards me. Printed emails, dozens of them, with subject lines bold and cold. My eyes scanned the first one, and my stomach twisted. "Transfer before she notices. Close quickly. Palm Springs property." I could not breathe. Another email, this one written by Rebecca to Daniel. "We need to finalize the transfer by Friday. Once her accounts are cleared, the down payment will be ready. Palm Springs is waiting." My throat burned. My own son and his wife were plotting to take everything. Not tomorrow, not someday, but now. Their greed had a timeline, and their confidence dripped from every word. Lily's voice trembled as she explained. "I was in the office earlier tonight. Mom left her laptop open. I shouldn't have looked, but something felt wrong. I read their emails. They've been planning for weeks. They think you won't notice until it's too late." I held the papers in my hands, but my vision blurred. My body betrayed me. My fingers quivered so hard, I had to place the papers back on the table before I tore them. A storm rose in my chest, but I forced myself to remain still. Silence. I had learned to survive in silence. My rage, my heartbreak, all of it pressed down until only my breath gave me away, sharp and uneven. Inside my mind, a war began. Could I really do it? Cut off my own son, the boy I once rocked to sleep? The child who once scribbled "Thanks, Mom" at the bottom of a math assignment? Or would I let them strip me bare, take everything I had left, and call it love? The question carved at me like a blade. Lily's eyes filled with tears. "Grandma, you can't let them do this to you. They're counting on you, staying quiet. They think you'll forgive them, no matter what. But if you don't act now, you'll lose everything." I covered her hand with mine, feeling how small and fragile her fingers were. "He's my son," I whispered, the words heavy with pain. "And you're my grandmother," she shot back, her voice suddenly fierce. "You're the only one who has ever made me feel safe. Mom and Dad don't see you anymore, but I do. I see everything they're trying to do to you, and I can't let it happen. Promise me, Grandma. Promise me you'll fight." Her plea cracked something inside me. For years, I had carried the burden of sacrifice as though it were holy, as though giving more would finally be enough. But here was my granddaughter, begging me not to surrender, begging me to protect not just myself, but the part of the family still unbroken. I looked back at the emails spread across the table. The words glared at me in black and white, undeniable and cruel. There was no misunderstanding, no room for excuses. They weren't simply careless. They were deliberate. They were predators circling their prey, and the prey was me. My hands steadied. The trembling faded. replaced by a stillness that felt foreign but necessary. Slowly, I gathered the papers into a neat pile, aligning the corners as though preparing evidence for a trial. My voice, when it came, was quiet but sharp. All my life, I believed sacrifice was love, but now I see it was the chain they used to keep me silent. That ends tonight. Lily squeezed my hand tighter, her eyes wide, relief breaking through the fear. So you'll fight? I met her gaze, steady and unflinching. Yes, Lily, I will fight. For you, for me, for the respect they buried under their greed. The clock ticked in the silence, marking the exact moment when my grief hardened into resolve. I was no longer just a mother betrayed. I was a woman reclaiming her dignity. And in that kitchen, with my granddaughter beside me, I made a vow that silence would no longer mean surrender. The morning air was cool and sharp when Lily and I stepped outside. She walked beside me, clutching the folder of printed emails as though it were a shield. My heart pounded, but my steps were steady. For years, I had carried burdens in silence. Today, I carried resolve. The drive to Wells Fargo felt longer than it was. The streets were already filling with people carrying flowers, balloons, and shopping bags. Signs in windows still glowed with Mother's Day promotions, reminders that the world celebrated mothers while mine had been cast aside. I gripped the steering wheel, focusing on the road. Beside me, Lily sat quietly, her small hand resting on top of the folder. Every so often, I saw her lips moving silently, as though she were rehearsing courage. When we arrived, the glass doors of the bank reflected the morning sun. My chest tightened as we walked inside. The scent of polished wood and fresh coffee hung in the air. Families were lined up at the counters, chatting about deposits, loans, and errands. But I was here for something entirely different. I was here to sever chains. A receptionist greeted us. "Good morning, ma'am. How can we help you today?" I straightened my shoulders. "I need to see a senior banker. It's urgent." She gave a polite nod and asked us to wait. Minutes later, a man in his 50s approached. He wore a navy suit and carried himself with calm authority. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm David Whitmore, senior banker. Please come with me." We followed him into a small glass office. He gestured for us to sit. The room was immaculate. Desk neatly arranged, pen aligned with a notepad, computer screen glowing faintly. I set my purse on the table and folded my hands. My voice was steady, though inside my chest, my heart thundered like a drum. "Mr. Whitmore," I began, "I want to close every joint account tied to my son Daniel and his wife Rebecca, effective immediately. I want all funds transferred into a new trust. The sole beneficiary will be my granddaughter, Lily." For a moment, his brows lifted. He adjusted his glasses, studying me. "That's a serious request, Mrs. Thompson. May I ask if you've consulted an attorney regarding these changes?" "I understand the implications," I said firmly. "This is my decision, and I want it done today." Lily's hand slid into mine under the table, her grip tight and trembling. That simple touch anchored me. It reminded me that I was not just protecting myself, I was securing her future. David leaned forward, his tone careful. "Joint accounts mean that both parties have full authority to withdraw at any time. But since you are here first, we can process your request. I'll need identification, account documents, and your signatures." I pulled the folder from my purse. Decades of paperwork, statements, deeds, identification, all prepared with a precision born of sleepless nights. My fingers no longer trembled as I laid them out across his desk. Each paper felt like evidence in a trial. David reviewed them methodically, then began typing into his computer. The clack of the keyboard was like the sound of dominoes falling. One by one, the accounts that once bound me to silence were unraveling. He printed a stack of forms, sliding them across the desk. These will close the joint accounts. Once signed, the funds will be separated and placed into a new trust account in your name, with Lily as sole beneficiary. I picked up the pen. The weight of it pressed into my hand, heavier than I expected. My eyes scanned the black lines of legal text. For years, my signature had been used to give access, to open doors for Daniel and Rebecca. Now, it would be used to shut those doors forever. I pressed the tip to paper. The ink flowed in dark strokes, each letter sharp and final. One signature, then another. Page after page, the sound of the pen moving was joined by the echo of the notary stamp David pressed onto each form. The thud of the stamp reverberated like the strike of a gavel in a courtroom. Judgment, closure, liberation. Under the table, Lily squeezed my hand tighter with every signature. Her small palm was damp, but her grip never faltered. I drew strength from her presence. Together, we were writing a new future, one line at a time. David placed the final page in front of me. This one establishes the trust. Please confirm the name of the beneficiary. My granddaughter, Lily Thompson, I said clearly, my voice filling the room with certainty. I signed the last line, then set the pen down. For the first time in years, my hands were still. David gathered the papers, stamping the final sheet before looking up. All right, Mrs. Thompson. The joint accounts are closed. The funds will be transferred into the new trust account by the end of the day. Only you have access while you're alive. And upon your passing, Lily becomes the sole beneficiary. No substitutions, no co-signers. Relief spread through me like a tide. I closed my eyes, letting his words settle into the deepest corners of my soul. The chains that had bound me for decades had been broken with ink and paper. When I opened my eyes, Lily was staring at me with tears shimmering. "Grandma," she whispered, "you did it." I turned my hand, gripping hers firmly. "No, sweetheart, we did it." David nodded respectfully. "It takes courage to make decisions like this, Mrs. Thompson. Not everyone does." I rose from the chair, holding the folder against my chest. "Courage doesn't always roar, Mr. Whitmore. Sometimes it just signs quietly." As Lily and I stepped back into the bright morning, the glass doors of Wells Fargo whooshed open behind us. People bustled past, carrying coffee cups and shopping bags, oblivious to the quiet war that had just been won inside. For me, every breath felt lighter. Every step felt freer. And in my heart, I knew this was only the beginning. I remember the lobby hum as David Whitmore, the senior banker, led me back to his glass office. At the same moment, a very different soundtrack played across town. My son Daniel and my daughter-in-law Rebecca lifted their phones for a live stream outside a luxury boutique. The camera tilted just enough to catch the gold letters above the door. Music pulsed from a speaker. Comments rushed up the screen like confetti. Rebecca beamed into the lens as if she were auditioning for a life she hadn't earned. Daniel stood at her shoulder, ready to play the part. Inside the bank, the door clicked shut behind me. David gestured to the chair, and I sat. Lily, my granddaughter, slid into the seat beside me, the folder of emails held tight against her ribs. I could hear the printer warming, the first sheets spooling out. On his screen, the account numbers I had carried for decades lined up like soldiers awaiting orders. Cut to the plaza. Rebecca swung a Gucci tote into frame, its leather gleaming under the noon sun. Look what generational wealth looks like, she sang into the phone, turning to Daniel for approval. He grinned, angling his wrist, so the watch he hadn't paid for flashed at the viewers. Hearts and fire emojis stacked in the margins. Someone typed, "Marry Rich." Another wrote, "Goals." David cleared his throat gently. "Mrs. Thompson, we'll go page by page. Read, initial, sign." His tone was measured. Mine was too. I took the pen. Lily's fingers found my free hand under the table, small and warm, an anchor in a bright, cold room. I read slowly, each clause shaped by the lessons life had carved into me. The first signature landed. The pen whispered across the paper. The notary's stamp answered with a decisive thud. Cut to the boutique. Rebecca panned over glass cases while a clerk floated beside them with rehearsed compliments. Daniel narrated prices like achievements. "When the trust clears, we'll finally do Palm Springs," he said, half to camera, half to himself. Rebecca lifted the tote again, close enough that the texture filled the screen. "Tell them, babe, it's just timing." Back to the bank. David slid the next set forward, closing the joint checking, closing the savings, removing their names from the safety net they had mistaken for a hammock. I signed. The stamp fell. Lily's grip pulsed with each impact, as if she could feel the chains snapping link by link. The room smelled of coffee and toner. My chest, of something like air after rain. Cut. Rebecca stepped into sun, tilting the phone for better light, the city glittering behind her. "We are building generational wealth," she announced, testing the phrase like a gemstone. Daniel nodded, adjusting his sunglasses. "No one can stop momentum," he said. A cashier rang them up. Daniel slid a card across the counter with a flourish he had not earned. The machine beeped a polite approval. Cameras loved the first act. David's screen glowed with confirmations. "This form establishes the new trust," he said. "Revocable while you live. Upon your passing, Lily becomes sole beneficiary. Notifications on every transaction. No external access." I nodded. The paper waited. I wrote my name with the hand that once wrote permission slips, checks for braces, and the note that sat in Daniel's lunchbox on test days. "Proud of you. Love, Mom." I signed. The stamp sank down, firm and final. Cut. Rebecca twirled in the boutique mirror, phone held high, comments cheering. "Say hi to our followers," she teased. Daniel leaned in, lips close to the camera. "Closest thing to free money is family, right?" Laughter as thin as the leather strap on his shoulder. David gathered a fresh stack. "These confirm the account closures," he said. Each page was a door shutting. Each signature was a bolt drawn. Lily squeezed my hand. I felt her breathe with me, 4 counts in, 4 out, as if we were swimmers pacing the same lane. My fear, once a wave, settled into something stable, like tide against pilings. Cut. Outside the boutique, the live stream continued. Rebecca lifted the bag to the sky. "We did it," she sang. "Gucci on a Sunday." Daniel's grin widened. "Wait until they see Palm Springs," he said. "We're manifesting houses and portfolios." The crowd in the comments agreed. The algorithm purred. David laid down the final document. "Last one," he said. This makes your instructions irrevocable, barring your written reversal. The word hung in the room, precise as a scalpel. I thought of Mother's Day at the restaurant door, of the carnations still waiting in my car, of the years I spent believing sacrifice was love when it was often something else, something that made me disappear. I lowered the pen to the line. My name came out steady. At last. Cut. Rebecca faced the lens once more, voice sweet with triumph. Generational wealth, she repeated, savoring it. Daniel echoed her like a chorus. Generational wealth. David lifted the stamp, met my eyes, and brought it down. The sound landed like a gavel. Final, he said. He raised it, ink dark and clean. Irrevocable. By mid-afternoon, the house had grown quiet in that particular way only Sundays can be quiet. The air was still, the curtains barely stirred, and the ticking of the clock seemed louder than usual. I had just set a kettle on the stove when my phone lit up on the counter. First one call, then another. Within minutes, the screen was filled with red numbers. By the time I picked it up, the total read 32 missed calls. Most of them were from Daniel, a few from Rebecca. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I didn't answer. Instead, I pressed play on the first voicemail. Mom, Daniel's voice began, strained, a mixture of panic and pleading. Please, you have to call me back. The cards, they're not working. Rebecca's furious. We're at the mall, and look, I don't know what you did, but we can fix it, all right? Just please, pick up. His voice cracked on the last word, and then the message ended. Another voicemail followed almost immediately. Mom, this is ridiculous. Do you understand what you've done? We can't pay for anything. The clerk is standing here like we're criminals. Just call me back, please. I stood in my kitchen, the phone buzzing again as the voicemail stacked. My kettle whistled softly, steam rising like a gentle reminder that the world kept turning. I poured the hot water over a bag of chamomile tea, letting the cup fill slowly, the fragrance calm against the chaos spilling from my phone. Another voicemail came through, this time Rebecca. Her voice was shrill, echoing with the clamor of a crowded mall in the background. Alice, I know this is you. Don't you dare play games with us. The cards are declining everywhere. Gucci, Nordstrom, even Starbucks. Do you want us humiliated in front of everyone? Fix this, now. I lifted the cup to my lips, the warmth steadying me. For the first time in years, their anger did not pierce me. It sounded small, like tantrums thrown by children who had lost their toys. By the time I walked out to the porch, the phone had buzzed itself nearly to death. I placed it face down on the table beside me, the screen still glowing with desperate notifications. I settled into my chair, cradling the tea in both hands, and listened instead to the rustle of leaves and the distant laughter of neighborhood children. The world outside my house was alive, untouched by the storm brewing in my voicemail. A few minutes later, the landline rang. I answered, expecting more shouting, but it was Mrs. Parker, my neighbor. Her voice carried a mix of concern and curiosity. Alice, dear, I just came back from the mall. You won't believe what I saw. You're Rebecca. She was at the register screaming at the cashier because her card kept declining. People were staring, phones out recording. And Daniel, poor boy, he was red as a beet, trying his card again and again. Nothing went through. I thought you should know. I closed my eyes, picturing the scene. Rebecca's fury, Daniel's panic, the crowd watching. It was not triumph I felt, not even satisfaction, but something quieter, steadier. Justice, finally settling in the open air. "Thank you for telling me," I said softly. Mrs. Parker hesitated, then added, "You've always been the strongest mother I know. Don't let them shake that from you." Her words lingered after I hung up. Strength. That was what outsiders saw, though my own children dismissed it. I leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking beneath me. The tea warmed my palms, steam rising like incense. Inside, my phone continued its frantic buzzing, desperate to pull me back into the chaos. But I had already chosen silence. Daniel's final voicemail arrived just as the sun began to dip. His voice, once confident and dismissive, was broken now. "Mom, please, we need you. I'm sorry for everything, all right? I didn't think you'd actually do it. I didn't think you'd turn your back on us like this. Call me back, please. I'm begging you." I listened to the tremor in his voice. For years, I had waited for those words. An apology, a confession, anything that acknowledged the pain he had caused. But hearing them now, wrapped in panic and self-preservation, they rang hollow. He was not sorry for what he had done. He was sorry for what he had lost. I took another sip of tea, savoring the calm that had become my armor. The evening sky blushed pink, birds settling into their nests. My phone lay silent at last, its battery nearly gone, the chaos it carried muffled by the steady rhythm of my breath. In that moment, I understood something with perfect clarity. Silence was not weakness. It was power. It was the refusal to argue with lies, the choice to let truth reveal itself in time. I set the empty cup down and folded my hands in my lap. "Silence," I whispered to the cooling air, "is the loudest answer." And I let the quiet wrap around me like a victory earned without a single raised voice. The knock came just after dusk. It wasn't timid. It rattled the doorframe, sharp and urgent, as though whoever stood outside believed persistence could force entry. I already knew it was Daniel. A mother always knows. I rose slowly from my chair on the porch, where my empty teacup rested, the last trace of chamomile still lingering in the air. The house behind me was quiet, my sanctuary wrapped in silence. I opened the door just enough to meet him. Daniel stood there, his face drawn tight, his shirt wrinkled as if he had pulled it on in a rush. His eyes were red, not from tears of remorse, I thought, but from frustration, humiliation, and exhaustion. For a brief flicker, I remembered the boy who once ran to me with scraped knees, searching for comfort. But the man in front of me was different. "Mom," he started, his voice breaking between anger and desperation. "You destroyed us." The words hung between us, heavy and sharp. My grip on the door tightened, but my voice came steady, honed by years of silence turned into steel. "No, son," I said, locking my gaze onto his. "You destroyed me first." He flinched as if the sentence had been a slap. His jaw worked, opening and closing, searching for words that refused to come. Finally, his anger found a foothold. "You didn't have to do this," he snapped. "You didn't have to humiliate us like this. Rebecca, she couldn't even pay for groceries today. People were staring, filming. Do you have any idea what that feels like?" I let his words wash over me, but I did not bend. "Do you have any idea," I said quietly, "what it feels like to stand outside on Mother's Day while your son won't even look at you? To sell your wedding ring so he could keep a roof over his head? to watch your retirement vanish because he swore he would rebuild and never forget. Daniel's chest rose and fell with quick breaths. That was years ago. Things change. We needed help. Families help each other. Families also honor each other, I replied, my voice low but steady. Families protect, not exploit. What you call help became a leash. You weren't asking for my hand, Daniel. You were taking pieces of my life until nothing was left. His eyes darted away, then back, fury simmering under his skin. You're supposed to be my mother. You don't just cut your own son off. I leaned forward slightly, the weight of decades behind my words. And you're supposed to be my son. You don't cut your mother's heart and then act surprised when she finally stops bleeding for you. For a moment, silence filled the space between us. His face twitched, grief and rage colliding like storm clouds. He tried again, softer this time, almost pleading. Mom, we can fix this. Just give us another chance. Transfer the accounts back. Rebecca didn't mean what she said at the restaurant. She was just upset. You can't throw us away over one mistake. One mistake. The phrase echoed in my chest like a cruel joke. I thought of the countless sacrifices, the silent nights I'd spent worrying about their bills, the trust I had signed away at the bank only days before. My hand pressed against the doorframe as if bracing against a storm. This wasn't one mistake, I told him. It was years of them. Years of silence when you should have spoken. Years of taking when you should have given. Years of letting me carry weight that wasn't mine to bear. I didn't throw you away, Daniel. You walked away first. His lips parted, but no words came. For a heartbeat, I saw it. The boy inside him. The child who once scribbled, "Thanks, Mom," at the bottom of a math assignment. The boy who once believed I could fix anything. But it was fleeting, gone as quickly as it came. In its place stood a man hardened by entitlement, anger, and pride. I saw then, with painful clarity, that the child I remembered no longer lived in him. That boy had vanished, buried beneath years of choices, lost to a silence that had grown louder than love. The world seemed to slow, each detail sharp, the porch light casting shadows on his face, the cool air wrapping around us, the faint sound of crickets chirping in the distance. It felt like the universe had given me one final glimpse, a slow-motion reminder that some doors, once closed, should never be opened again. My hand moved to the edge of the door. Daniel's eyes widened slightly, panic flickering across his face. "Mom, please," he whispered. "Don't do this." But I had already chosen. With a calmness I had never felt before, I began to close the door. The hinges groaned softly, the threshold narrowing until only a sliver of his face remained. "No, son," I said one last time. This time, silence is my answer. And then I shut the door. The latch clicked into place, final and unyielding. On the other side, I could hear him exhale sharply, his footsteps retreating down the porch steps. I leaned my back against the door, closing my eyes. My heart was heavy, but it beat strong. The threshold had become my line, the moment where past and future divided. I had not destroyed him. I had only reclaimed myself. Inside the house, the silence grew vast, but it no longer felt empty. It felt like power. D through closets, folding linens I hadn't touched in years. There was something healing in the rhythm of it. Hands busy, hearts calmer, the silence between us gentle rather than heavy. One Saturday morning, we turned to the garden. Weeds had crept across the beds, choking out the roses and tulips I once loved. Side by side, we pulled them free, the earth rich and damp beneath our fingers. Lily laughed when a worm wriggled across her glove, her face bright with the simple joy of tending something real. For hours we worked, digging, planting, watering, until color returned to the soil and the yard looked alive again. When the sun dipped lower, I went to my car and opened the passenger door. The bouquet of carnations still rested there, their petals now wilted, but stubbornly clinging to life. I lifted them carefully, the paper crinkling in my hands, and carried them into the house. On the kitchen counter sat a glass vase I had not used in years. I filled it with fresh water, trimmed the stems, and arranged the flowers myself. For decades, I had bought flowers only to hand them away, to Daniel, to Rebecca, to hospital rooms, to celebrations that never celebrated me. But this time was different. This time, I placed them in the center of my own table. For the first time, I put flowers in a vase for myself. I stood back and looked at them. They weren't perfect anymore. The edges had browned. The blossoms sagged slightly. Yet they were still beautiful, still breathing. In their persistence, I saw myself, bent but not broken, diminished but still here. Later that evening, I sat at my desk with pen and paper. The words came slowly at first, then poured out like water breaking through a dam. Dear Daniel, I loved you more than air. I gave you everything I had, every sacrifice, every ounce of strength. I sold pieces of myself so you could stand tall. But in the process, I learned something painful. Love cannot erase me. I cannot be erased. I paused, the ink still wet on the page. My hand trembled, not with weakness, but with the weight of truth finally spoken. You were my son before you were anything else. But somewhere along the way, you forgot I was a person too. You asked for help, and I gave it. You asked for silence, and I gave that too. But I cannot give you what is left of me. That belongs to me, and to Lily, and to the life I still have yet to live. The words ended there, sharp and final. I signed my name, but did not seal the envelope. Instead, I folded the letter neatly and placed it in the top drawer of my desk. It was not meant for Daniel, not anymore. It was meant for me, a record of love and loss, of what I had carried and what I had chosen to release. Lily found me at the desk and asked softly, "Are you going to send it?" I shook my head. "No, sweetheart. Some truths are only meant to be written, not delivered." She nodded, her young face reflecting wisdom beyond her years. Together, we closed the drawer. That night, as I walked through the house, I noticed how different it felt. The walls no longer echoed with disappointment. The air no longer carried the weight of betrayal. Even the silence had changed. It no longer suffocated. It comforted. I paused at the table where the carnations stood in their vase. They glowed faintly in the lamplight, their tired blossoms still reaching upward. For once, they were not waiting to be given away. They were mine, a symbol of love I had finally directed inward. I touched a petal gently, whispering to myself, "You are still here." And so was I. The road to Astoria curved along the Oregon coast, the Pacific stretching endlessly beside us. Lily sat in the passenger seat, her face pressed to the glass, eyes wide at the shifting colors of sea and sky. I had not been to the ocean in years, not since Frank was alive. Back then, we had come here for anniversaries and quiet escapes, walking hand in hand as the tide pulled foam across the sand. Now, with Lily by my side, it felt like the right place to bring this chapter of my life to rest. We parked near the boardwalk and carried our shoes in hand, the cool sand sinking beneath our feet. The ocean roared in greeting, waves rushing in with a power that was ancient and unyielding. The air smelled of salt and pine, sharp and clean. For a long moment, I just breathed it in, letting the vastness of the horizon press gently against the tightness that had lived in my chest for too long. Lily ran ahead, laughing as she chased the retreating waves, her footprints temporary in the wet sand. I followed more, slowly, each step deliberate, savoring the feeling of the earth holding me steady. The ocean had always been a mirror for me, its depth, its storms, its relentless rhythm. It spoke truths without words. I stopped near the waterline, lifting my face to the sky. The wind tangled my hair, and the gulls cried overhead, circling in arcs of freedom. My lips parted before I even realized I was speaking. This silence is mine. This life is mine. The words drifted upward, carried by the breeze, swallowed by the open sky. They were not shouted, not demanded. They were claimed. For decades, I had given my voice away, but here, before the endless ocean, I took it back. Behind me, Lily returned, her cheeks flushed from running. She slipped her hand into mine, her fingers cold, but her smile warm. Together, we watched the waves fold and unfold, the eternal dance of loss and renewal. I thought of Daniel then, of his face at my doorstep, eyes clouded with anger and desperation. For so long, I had waited for him to return to me, to apologize, to remember the boy who once wrote "Thanks, Mom" in shaky pencil. But standing on that shore, I understood the truth. If you're waiting for an apology, I whispered, half to Lily, half to the sea, you'll wait forever. The words didn't sting the way I thought they would. Instead, they felt like release, like setting down a burden that had carved into my shoulders for too long. Acceptance washed through me like the tide, gentle, steady, unstoppable. Lily squeezed my hand. "Grandma," she said softly, "you don't need their apology. You have me." Tears welled in my eyes, but they were not tears of grief this time. They were of gratitude. I pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her hair. The ocean thundered its agreement, waves crashing and retreating in endless testimony that life always moves forward. As the sun dipped lower, painting the water in streaks of orange and gold, I turned once more toward the horizon. My voice came steady, clear, carried by wind and surf alike. They thought silence meant defeat, but silence became my power. The gulls wheeled above, the waves roared below, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. If you've ever been shut out by the ones you loved, know this: you are not powerless. I used to believe silence meant weakness, that being quiet was the same as being erased. But I have learned that silence, when chosen, can be strength. It can be the wall that holds back cruelty, and the bridge that carries you toward healing. Perhaps you're listening to this story with memories of your own echoing in your chest. Maybe someone you trusted dismissed you. Maybe family you sacrificed for treated your love like an obligation rather than a gift. If so, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not alone. There are many of us, mothers, grandmothers, daughters, who have walked through that valley of hurt. We have given pieces of ourselves until nothing was left. And then one day, we realized the only way to survive was to claim back what had always been ours: our worth, our voice, our dignity. So let me tell you this: The rejection you endured does not define you. The betrayal you suffered is not the end of your story. Even in the deepest silence, there is still hope, still light waiting to rise, and it is never too late to begin again. Before we say goodbye, I'd love to know something from you. Where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee? Or is it a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let us know in the comments. We read everyone with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. Not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Your presence matters here. Every like, every comment, every subscription helps build a circle of strength where no one has to feel alone again. Rate this story from 0 to 10. Tell us where you're listening from. And don't forget to share it with someone who might need to hear that they are not powerless. Together, we can remind each other that dignity is never lost. It only waits for us to claim it. As for me, I return now to the small rituals that keep me grounded. The carnations sit in their vase on my table, their petals softer now, but still holding color. They are mine, just as this silence, this life, is mine. I pour myself another cup of tea, the steam curling upward in the lamplight. I lift the cup to my lips, and for the first time in years, I smile without hesitation. A quiet smile, but full of certainty. Wherever you are tonight or this morning, I hope you carry this story with you. And I hope you remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. Sometimes it waits quietly until you are ready to open your heart. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Take care, and I'll see you in the next story.